Hello, welcome to Philosophy Roulette number 147, where we get random papers of philosophy off the internet and read and review it live. Please send me something if you want me to read it, otherwise I will just grab something that I don't know. But if you send it to me, then you get to choose, and I still don't know, but it still works. So much bioethics. Everything is bioethics in the last weeks. I understand that we have a pandemic, and that's why I'm sitting here doing this myself, but so much bioethics. Ooh, contemporary political theory. Let's take a look at that. Critical discourse studies, education, philosophy, and theory. We'll take a look at that. European Journal for Philosophy of Science. Portuguese. Sorry, Portuguese folks, I don't speak Portuguese. Foundations of Science. Okay, so let's see what we got. We got a few journals here. Let's see if they got forthcoming stuff. See if they have page numbers on their forthcoming stuff too. I keep forgetting to fix that. I don't know if you heard it, but it's like a bump and a bark at the same time when the search fails for the. Alright, so most of these don't have page numbers. Some of them. Ooh, this is 5 pages. I could handle that. Forthcoming. Political theory of neoliberalism. We just did one on neoliberalism, but that was fine. It's kind of fun to beat up on neoliberalism anyway. Let's see if it's on Google Scholar. Ooh, open access looks like. I mean, I have a hard time saying no to a 5-page paper, even if it's, yeah, so this is like very small font and not double space, but is this a review or something? Oh no, this is, Echo Chamber of Political Discourse. Okay. This makes my life very easy when I find something this quick. Alright. So, yeah, 2 minutes in. This is about as fast as it ever gets, even when I already have something. Alright, so we're going to do the political theory of neoliberalism. Political philosophy is good. It's, a lot of it gets published. And contemporary political theory, if you are live, you can grab the paper by typing exclamation paper in the show notes, or the link. This link will be in the. You can type exclamation paper in the chat box, and it will be in the show notes after the. Once it's uploaded in either on Twitch or YouTube. So we're gonna be doing some political theory again, which is nice, just because I don't know political theory, and so I get to learn something. I mean, yeah, when we do the somewhat like logic-y science stuff, sometimes I'm like, I know this, I don't like this, or I know this and I do like it, but that's very different. Oh, there's other things, now that I've been doing this for almost, over 140 episodes, I'm starting to understand, I have it set up as easy as possible to get everything working, but there's now even more things I can do. It's funny how it takes a long time for me to think of anything. Oh no, this is a review. Okay, forget this one. Stanford University Press, 2018. And I'm a fool. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next one. Firefox. So. Yeah, see, review. I didn't realize. See this? I didn't read that line is what I get. Alright, that's fine. Let's see, anything else to read right here? This is 1 to 34. I'm not reading that. Such is life. But this is why I like suggestions for what to read, because that saves me this little search time at the beginning of every episode, though I do kind of like it. Shows what I'm up to. Let's see, is there forthcoming on critical discourse studies? I also don't know critical discourse, so that also makes it interesting to me. 1 to 33 there. 1 to 15, something to think about. Pentatic cartography? Pentatic cartography? Huh. Interesting. I mean, I try to avoid 16-page papers because that gets over an hour of me reading. That's hard. So let's just move on and see what's available in the European Journal for Philosophy of Science. Alright, there's only one of those there, so let's see what we got in terms of any short papers. 13 on Shackles Nothing from Infinity. Interesting. 121. I'm gonna have like a little motto from Pascal. If I had more time, I would have written a shorter paper. Write shorter papers, folks. That's 15. That's 9. Found it from bit in quantum mechanics. Alright, let's see what that has to say. Can theories of mental representation adequate? I'll explain. 14 pages. I'll come back to that one maybe. 15. Ontology, infinity, and Spinoza's thought. That's kind of cool. Oriental mysticism, Western scientific tradition. You know, that just sounds exciting. Let's see if this is available. Axiomatization of the symbols of... Alright, let's see if it's available. If it is, no! Come on, be open access. These are never open access when you want them to be. $40 to read this paper. $40! It's crazy. I'm not that well funded. Maybe if I didn't care. Or at least was more well connected, I guess you could say too, because if I had some sort of access I could do this. But in some sense I also like my bitter I can't get a hold of things. just to show off what the situation is if you're not actually associated with the university. There's like hundreds of dollars. Like, oh yeah, assuming that like I actually had to pay for all the papers and they're not just posted to fill papers or on someone's website. I mean, this would be, I guess 100 times 40 is $4,000 to read the papers I've read. And I'm not even saying all of them are good or worth it. It's like, but who? Alright, let's see what we got. Entanglement of art, coefficient, or creativity. How can you slice this sort of thing? Let's see how small the words are here. Alright, let's see how sciencey this actually gets. Ooh, pictures. I like pictures. Alright, that'll solve for me. We got pretty pictures in this one. That's why I like the aesthetics papers too. Sometimes they have pretty pictures and aesthetics is interesting to me. Okay, so this is much more... this looks great. Actually, let's go back to the fill papers page. Cool. Kyoko, Nakamura, and Yukio, Pegio, Gunji. I assume they're Japanese, but I apologize if they're not. And I apologize if I said your name. And again, now this is the real paper this time, so let's find out. And that didn't take too long, so that's okay. Okay. Introduction, the art, coefficient, and creativity. What is this doing? What is this paper already? I'm confused. What is creativity? Marcel Duchamp in his lecture, Creative Act. Why is the... Yeah, see the reference is on the inside of the quotes? Maybe that's how this journal does stuff. I don't know, I've never seen that. Anyway, express creativity as the art coefficient. The art coefficient is the difference between artist's intention and realization which is created. Whereas 1917 Fountain, while Duchamp planned to express Fountain, a urinal was exhibited. A urinal is a ready-made product that cannot be anything but a urinal. Well, until he exhibited it as a fountain. Therefore, when a urinal called a fountain is presented at an art museum, art experiences are intensely jolted by the gap between the urinal and a fountain. This gap enters the outside, for example, the art experiencer's interpretations. People have usually sought the significance of Duchamp's art coefficient in the happenstance encounter between artists and art experiencers, and see it as the location in the unavoidability of the artwork being interpreted independently of the author's intention. However, the art coefficient can be seen as the difference between what one has planned and that which is realized in artistic production. Okay, so we're talking about intentions of artists here and how it matters in art appreciation. So we've talked about this before, too. The plan can be defined not only to painting, but also other arts and even to cognition and perception by referring to anticipation and or post-diction. This is a strategy for understanding and outside. It is in strategy for understanding an outside that is formed actively yet in a way that is not completely controllable. The artist is, in other words, one who actively designs an art coefficient that cannot be deliberately managed. An example of something with an art coefficient of 0 is a plastic food model. Food plastic models exist so that customers can imagine in advance what the food offered is like, and they are expected to be similar as possible to the food actually served. Oh, okay. A plastic food. I didn't even understand what this phrase meant, but it means exactly what it says. Plastic food model. It's like a plastic, like a hamburger made out of plastic, basically. That's meant to look like the real thing. Okay. I was like, what is a plastic food model? Is it like a mannequin displaying food? But yeah, no. See, I can read and have no idea what I'm reading. Happens a lot in philosophy. One can enjoy eating unexpected dishes in an omakase, chef's recommendation course. In this case, a creative attitude that enjoys the kind of gap presented in Fountain is sought from both the cook and the customer. Interesting, I have never thought about the chef's recommendation as just present me with something as a artistic thing. In creativity, gaps are welcome, and the greater the coefficient, the greater the possibility of an impact and deep thought. With that said, not just anything with a large difference is good. That would be simply unrelatedness. The great gap between intention and realization can entail the alternative of the two. For example, if you display a urinal as a fountain to some of your friends who are not familiar with the arts, they are surprised at the gap between a urinal and fountain. Since a urinal and fountain cannot coexist, they can be alternative to each other. Sometimes it is regarded as a urinal, but sometimes it can be regarded as a fountain for your friends. If the gap for the experiencer is too great to allow for the concepts to be alternatives to each other, they will instead be assumed unrelated. Yeah, so if people just I just don't get it, then the artist has failed because I just don't get it. And that does happen, and that's okay. Sometimes you have to have a background. In the case of Fountain exhibited by Duchamp, the urinal and the fountain are different in nature. While each concept is different, they're inseparable and exist together. With his work, Duchamp set up a coming and going between the urinal and the fountain. By falling into this difference gap, even art experiencers, who are supposed to be unrelated to the production of the work, jump into and experience fountain, which they have been linked to without possessing any relationship to it. This kind of creation is the art coefficient. The core of this idea could appear in many other contexts. Since Austin 62 proposes the idea of a speech act, it is argued that the outside of a language is rushed into the language in the form of speech act. In our sense, various contexts and unpredictable meanings outside the ordinal use of a word could rush into the gap between the speaker's intention and the listener's interpretation. Especially, the concepts of illocution and perlocution in linguistics is strongly relevant for our idea. Many cognitive and/or linguistic illusions, such as cognitive bias and the liar paradox, could be interpreted in terms of the aspect of art coefficient. So I guess what's going on is that there's some sort of gap between what you say and what you do, because in the speech act, so I pronounce you married or whatever. So saying I pronounce you married, assuming I'm someone who has that legal right to do that, those words don't really mean anything on their own, but in that case, then you become married when those words are said, and therefore there's a big difference between saying the words and getting married. Similar, I guess, with the liar paradox, is you say some very non-interesting words, like I am lying to you right now, and all of a sudden you end in paradox, and you're just like, oh my god, logic is broken. So that's sort of a big gap between some random words that seem pretty much okay and just breaking all of logic. So there is some sort of gap here, I guess, that they're appealing to between things that seem not very important on their own and then perhaps their very significant consequences. Okay. In quantum theory, entanglement refers to a pure states being tangled together. The art coefficient can be seen as an entanglement in the artistic act. Therefore, artists show their skill in how they incorporate gaps into their work in an exquisite arrangement of how they introduce leaps to the outside into it. Below, we will present examples from 3 works of Nakamura, one of the authors of this paper, that give rise to artistic entanglement. Before presenting the examples, we explain the metaphorical notion of entanglement in the next section. Okay, so they're using a particular kind of scientific concept, entanglement, to illustrate this sort of difference in intention and in content in some sense. Alright, so let's see what they have to say. The notion of entanglement is used to describe states that are separated with each other but remain connected in a non-local way. Therefore, an entangled pair of two sets of states which is assumed to be expressed by a product of two sets that is strongly correlated. We expand the notion of entanglement in a broader sense. In linguistic philosophy, Wittgenstein denied the meaning of a word in a sentence and proposed the idea of a performative sense. Kripke took after Wittgenstein's idea and showed that if the referent of the name Kurt Gödel is defined by the person who proved the incompleteness theorem, and if it is clarified that Gödel himself did not verify the incompleteness theorem and plagiarized the idea, then one can be faced with the situation in which the person who proved the incompleteness theorem did not prove it. That implies a coexistence of proved it and not proved it in the form of a liar paradox. Funny enough, in history there's a bunch of stuff like this. L'Hopital rule in mathematics was not written by L'Hopital. L'Hopital was just some rich guy who paid, I think, Bernoulli, the other very famous mathematician, but not inherently rich on his own, to write up a textbook, and he proved some theorem in it, and L'Hopital paid for him to do it, so his rule was not proved by him. And then, of course, there's the old joke, Murphy's Law was not proved by Murphy, but by someone else with the same name. Okay, in Kripke's argument, not proved incompleteness theorem is just one of the examples outside of proved incompleteness theorem in conventional reference to Kurt Gödel. Various possible reference outside the name Kurt Gödel can rush into the scene of performing the name Kurt Gödel. In our context, various possible reference in the underlying context can rush into the gap between speaker's intention and listener's interpretation. It results in a paradoxical sentence in which not proved but in incompleteness theorem is superposed onto proved by incompleteness theorem. In other words, the sentence is entangled with underlying context which can contain various possible reference, and that entanglement can entail coexistence, that is, superposition of a specific conventional meaning and alternative meaning of the sentence in an extreme case. However, entanglement of a sentence and its context is unclear because context cannot explicitly appear. Okay, so this is using quantum logic to talk about this stuff. This has been done before, trying to give multi-state interpretations of quantum mechanics and superposition to talk about contradictions and the physical states of reality. So this is I haven't seen anything like this in a while, but it has been attempted before, where you've got a logic that accounts for contradictory states or states of multiple different kinds of physical realities. So they're bringing that into the artistic context. Okay. In this sense, perlocution and illocution play an essential role to understanding the significance of entanglement in linguistic phenomena. When a sentence and its underlying context is replaced by a speech and an act, respectively, one can find illocution in the form of entanglement. The illocution can also entail a paradoxical speech, such as, please speak in a small voice here, in a loud voice. Yeah. This idea is taken after by cognitive linguistics, especially proposed by Lakoff, in which the prototype of given meaning is located at the center of the distribution of possible meanings, and the marginal area of the distribution is connected to the opposite to the prototype. While coexistence of A and not A is one example of coexistence of different meanings, reference, and context, coexistence of various things can be attracted by the gap between speaker's intention and listener's interpretation. We expand the idea of entanglement to contain such a broad sense of coexistence. Especially the mirror neurons could be strongly relevant for the notion of entanglement. It was previously considered that the mirror neurons of a monkey and a human brain can fire to the same act of both him, herself, or of others. Thus, it is considered that the sociality can result from the mirror neurons. However, the notion of the same act can be misleading. How can one identify the same act for one's own act and another's act? The act cannot be separated from its goal, drive, feeling, emotion, and so on. How can one determine the boundary of a specific act? Nobody can do that, and mirror neurons also cannot do so. In fact, it was recently reported that mirror neurons can fire not only fire not only a specific visual image of others, which represents one's own act, but also the image which can be relevant for the goal, feeling, or emotion derived from the act. The latter implies that representation of a specific act is entangled with its derived information processing, such as inferred goal, feeling, or emotion. I didn't know that. That's interesting. In our sense, information processing at a certain level cannot be separated from that at a higher level in the brain. The latter information processing is regarded as the information processing outside of the former one. Since information processing is interpreted as an interaction between a sender and a receiver of information, we can consider that the outside of a specific information can rush into the gap between the sender's intention. Yikes. My apologies. Now you know what my cell phone ringer sounds like. There's no. Let me turn this off. Usually don't get calls at this time, but then again, this is an hour later than I usually broadcast, so sometimes I do. There's nothing but the notion of art coefficient and or extended notion of entanglement, as well as the origin of sociality resulting from the mirror neurons in the sense of entanglement. The gap between the artist's intention and realization can entail the entanglement of the masterpiece and the outside of it. That is, creativity hidden in the masterpiece featured with the gap between the intention and the realization. A Buddha bug, Buddhahoptera, praising a rapidly ascending plotus and glistening. Well, I've never said anything like that before. And considering I read a lot of philosophy, that's saying something new. A Buddha bug. Okay, so let's see. We've got this entanglement and the gap between the things entangled. Platypuses live in Australia. They have a flat beak like ducks. They look like moles and swim with agility of fishes. Furthermore, they have a single foramen like reptiles and birds. Excretion, procreation, and the laying of eggs all happen through one hole. While they lay eggs like birds, the hatched babies are nursed by their mother like mammals. This mixed-up living thing is a strange harmonious unification of various aspects. Nakamura took a strong interest in the platypus itself. It is itself a mediator of heterogeneous elements in this gap. She was motivated to create by her desire to express this heterogeneity of a platypus. One summer she saw a lotus growing in a pot at a temple. She was driven by the intuitive desire to mix this lotus up with the platypus. In reality, this could never happen in its home of Australia. However, for Nakamura, a lotus and platypus pointed to a heterogeneity that foretold entanglement. She composed the work so that it would beckon them. However, if one just reconstructs a platypus and a lotus as a mixed thing without giving it much thought, there is even the possibility of debasing the heterogeneity of the platypus by turning into a strange monster. How can one bring out the heterogeneity of the platypus in a way that can ensure various patches as a whole, the platypus? When she was struggling with regard to this, she saw a jewel-bug nymph taking shelter from rain near a window. On its back was an unestablished iridescent marble pattern. All of a sudden, in its shape, she saw a shape resembling a human. For Nakamura, this was more than an illusion of the eyes. It brought about in her intuitive feeling that the phenomenon of seeing resulting from the interaction of an object and its observer. This was the perspective of an internal measurement. When we perceive something, we tend to adopt a perspective that is based on the separation between that of an observer and object. External measurement is observation that rises above to look at the world as a whole. It is objective scientific representation. On the other hand, in the case of internal measurement, the observer exists within the world and cannot observe without influencing that which is being observed. Okay, so we've got subjective and objective interpretations? Okay. In other words, in internal measurement, the exterior, that which cannot be controlled, is also internal to observation, rendering ineffective, although not dissolving, the difference between the exterior and interior and mixing up different things. Therefore, the coexistence of and the gap between an unrelated bug and human become possible. This shares commonalities with the finding of Buddha. If one holds that this mixing up is entanglement, if with the attitude of internal observer one holds the consciousness that sees the human and a jewel bug sees the heterogeneity of the platypus. A Buddha bug descended to the gap between the platypus and the lotus. This is a strange connection. In a way, the Buddhahoptera, Buddha bug, worships and glistens, and Platyplotus was able to splendidly jump. Okay, so we've got pictures of Platypodus and also Buddha bug. Okay, so you can, I don't know if, oh no! I forgot to switch over. I'm so sorry. Chat, yell at me if I make mistakes. And if you have any questions too, I'd be happy to answer. Oh, shucks. Well, not like there was nothing super critical in any of these, it was just text. So, it's alright. Alright, so we got the pictures. Well, thankfully at least I didn't do any highlighting. Sometimes I do highlighting. Alright, so, you know what? Let's, see if I can get a little zoom in on the Buddha bug. What happened? Did I lose it? Nope, there it is. Here's the Buddha bug. So you can see there's a Buddha shape here on the bug. That's cutesy. Very cute. I like that. And then this is the platypus and the lotus. So okay. So here we go. An entangled meal. At one point, Nakamura saw the movie Moby Dick, based on Herman Melville's novel. In the painting, a whale rises amidst the flashing of lightning and chaos. This is the signature of the whale depicted by Queequeg. I don't know how to say that either. And that's probably English. It is the large white whale named Moby Dick that was never to be captured. Beckoned by Captain Ahab, the crew goes towards the whale who is reaching his end. At first, Nakamura wanted to paint such a whale. However, after reading this thing in French, the theme of the whale suddenly escaped her and was driven by the impulse to depict a meal in the harmonious world that Fourier claimed. Fourier, maybe? What is called combined harmonization could consist of individuals' various taste and happiness. Fourier's dream on new society is the attitude to enable this harmonization, which can be implemented by the internal measurement consistent with Fourier's terminology, infinitely small. So it is Fourier. So Fourier's transform. Okay. On one hand, the internal measurement perpetually mixes the measurement state with external perturbation. On the other hand, the infinitely small enables harmonization of intrinsically different things. Both of them can enable happiness. Okay, so, this is the Moby Dick, so I guess this is fishes, or something else. I don't know. But it looks cool. Yeah, it is the Moby Dick. Alright, so it's a, yeah, so, okay. Let's see what else it says. Alright, resulting in entanglement. Although we do not refer to Fourier further in this paper, there is a more important discussion about the idea between Fourier and Nakamura's work. We would like to discuss it at another opportunity. Nakamura found sawashi dishes, a kind of local cuisine from Kochi Prefecture in Japan, made at home for guests on celebratory occasions such as weddings and birthdays. Eaten in large groups, the food is placed on a large plate with a diameter of around 12 inches or more. This plate, which brings together hors d'oeuvres, a main fish dish, side dishes, and a dessert, is a highlight of sawashi dishes. This style of dining originates in Nairai ceremony at the end of a Shinto rite in which participants would share food that has been offered to the god. This tradition has been passed down across Japan as a traditional feast in which the god and people eat together, strengthening their connection. However, due to its popularization, its original premise was lost, leading to the difference between what is planned and what is realized. There is no order of dishes or hierarchy between food as there is in-course meals. Guests eat what they like when they want to. While going ahead with their own meal on their own terms, they deepen their relationship with others. Also, in sawashi dishes, people, the old, the young, men, women, are equal around the plate. In Kochi, holding such feasts is referred to as okiyaku-su. I apologize for my Japanese. Both people from the family who invited others, as well as those who were invited, sit around the plate. Therefore, the relationship of entertaining and being entertained, as well as the distinctions between leading and supporting roles, gradually becomes ambiguous. The meaning of the gathering in the end as well as it just turns into a drinking party. Sawashi dishes include lots of food with an emphasis on appearance. A plover-like arrangement of sea bream that appears to have gathered together in the ocean, and even bonsai tree-like plates. When the drinking party goes in full swing, people drink together while entertaining each other using chopsticks and cups, and guests become constituent elements of the plate and fragmented decorating the feast. Everything that is comprised the meal becomes completely fragmented, and style aspiring towards an infinitesimally small heterogeneity becomes immediate. Even the bites of mackerel, sushi deliciously brought to one's mouth, take on a divine nature. In the note at the end of Sawatchi de Moby Dick, Gunji says, a god's messenger like frog and sparrow, who play the role of mediator, continually adjust a breaking set of things, while making the top of a plate be a background with the piece together remaining offerings. Each individual meal is continually combined and opened up as a site of summoning. The head of mackerel that remains on the plate during the party was like a whale raising its head from the surface of the ocean. At this time, from Nakamura, the whale descended to the gap of Sawatchi dishes. However, on the plate was not a great large Moby Dick, but a life-size one. This entanglement of humans, food, and whales reflected by a small yet divine plate. Interesting. In the Jewish tradition, you've got the Passover Seder, which is defined. I mean, it just means order, is just what it means. Seder. And so, as opposed to this, where the order is lost, or intentionally lost in this one, I mean, you're commanded by like religious authority of the Seder to drink 4 glasses of wine. That's plenty to get enough people drunk. So in some sense, I always found it to be a drinking meal just the same. So you start with order and you end up getting kind of sloshed by the end of Seder. And so it seems sort of reasonable in the same way, but this one seems way more self-aware of just getting everybody drunk. Even though the people who set up the Seder must have known what they were doing. I can't imagine that they didn't. But then again, my theology on history of Judaism is terrible, so you shouldn't take my word for it. It's just, this reminds me of this sort of ordering where you're supposed to somehow have a religious meal, but it's like you're intentionally getting very drunk. So, I don't know. Okay, someone digging landscapes. Known againness. In the early afternoon, when it's still a bit chilly, one goes to the ocean shore at low tide. The bubbly and sand feels nice and sticky on one's bare foot. Using the gentle slopes of rolling beach as a guide, one dips one leg into the sand, feeling the cold of the ground and something hard. It is a clam. Using one's big toe, one carefully gets it out of the sand and takes into one's hand a skyscraper. The pattern on the shellfish. While searching for various landscapes, peonies, running crows, snowstorms, piled umbrellas, one looks into the distance and finds the pattern in the shell of a clam. Unknown viewers are more nostalgic than reality. For Nakamura, shellfish gathering is synonymous with nostalgic things. Just by hearing the phrase shellfish gathering, she experiences a time that is more nostalgic than reality, like gazing out into an unknown distant scene. In other words, shellfish gathering is time. It is not the sense of time also manifested by entanglement. Is it not the sense of time also manifested by entanglement? There is a tendency to view time as always being fixed, going in one direction, from past to future. However, in reality, this is not the case. Gunji proposed an inference system equipped with both Bayesian and inverse Bayesian inference, showing the coexistence of past experience, eye of the past, and present perception of the eye of the present. So Gunji 2018. Gunji sees this as generalized déjà vu. The everyday is filled with déjà vu. Time, which clearly extends, the closer the memory is to one's earliest memory from childhood and is supposed to be fixed, is felt to be shorter and shorter as one goes back to the present. Amidst coming and going between Bayesian inference and inverse Bayesian inference, we invite the exterior, that is, time, into the interior. With them coexisting, we are always forming time. It is pure time, not entanglement, that is always descends into the gap from the exterior. In Japan, there is the superstition that mirages arise from the energy released by shellfish. The distant scenery seen by Nakamura while searching for various landscapes was the clam that creates a tower on its body and turns into a landscape. This landscape that is more nostalgic than reality is time itself, in which things of different natures, things coexist. Different nature things coexist. Shellfish would go back and forth between manifest imagination and latent reality, were the ones searching for landscapes. Alright, so let's show the image again. I don't know if I can zoom in because I'll just end up cutting it off. It's interesting now. So we've got like the human stuff all in the back and the sort of the shell towers down here. So interesting sort of thing. Someone digging landscape known againness. 2017. Okay. Conclusion. The universality of heterogeneous things. The entanglement in Nakamura's artistic production discussed in this paper is very arbitrary. Throwing a platypus and lotus together, seeing a human and a jewel bug, a Sawachi dishes, feast facing Moby Dick, shellfish becoming a landscape. These are all only meaningful for Nakamura. What is arbitrariness equals heterogeneity for an individual only has meaning for that person. In principle, the meaning of arbitrariness hinders external evaluation. There is no universal value in arbitrariness with respect to external measurement. The emotions of enjoying nostalgia and deliciousness are in the first place arbitrary and therefore completely different in nature from each other. One cannot share or exchange the same deliciousness. While different things cannot coexist, exchange and fuse, they can be harmonized because they can confront with each other. Confronting with each other is one of implementations of harmonization with respect to difference. There is a major difference in universality depending on whether one sees homogeneity with invariance or sees heterogeneity with originality. Because these emotions are different, unrelated, and pure and meaningless from the perspective of the world and only meaningful to this eye, each person satisfies a universality that they can be confident is happiness. In the first place, was entanglement not the tangling together of pure states? This is the universality of things that are different in nature. Heterogeneity in the artist's creative acts is a sensual metaphor. Even Duchamp did not yield a concrete image of artificial coefficient. We here develop a concrete image of artificial coefficient by introducing entanglement compared to the entanglement in quantum mechanics. Speaking in our terminology, entanglement may not be consistent with the entanglement in quantum mechanics since we focus on macroscopic creative acts. For instance, it is not easy to estimate the virtual dimension in biological time in terms of quantum mechanics. Although our discourse could contain some issues on biological and or psychological problems, we consider that the essence of entanglement in quantum mechanics is based on the mixture of different pure states or harmonization of different things which can yield the essential mechanism of creative acts. And starting from Duchamp's art coefficient, we propose the connection between entanglement and creativity resulting from the art coefficient. While entanglement in quantum mechanics represents correlated states which can be assumed to be independently separated with each other, we expand the notion of entanglement, which various contexts outside of a particular context can be attracted by the gap between the intention and realization in the particular context. Such an extended entanglement can be found in various fields, not only in cognitive linguistics, but in brain science referring to mirror neurons. While we focus on the emergence of a masterpiece of art resulting from entanglement, the origin of sociality and or language could be explained by the notion of entanglement. Various other notions are part of the quantum epistemology, such as contextuality, superposition, and emergence, and might be useful to improve the notion of art coefficient and thus creativity. Okie dokie. So what's going on in this paper? It's a little bit complex. We've got really an account of artistic subjectivity is going on here, and they're using sort of a scientific framework to try to spell this out. So the question is, how do we get from this sort of subjectivity to an objective thing? And I think they're basically maybe the most interesting thing that they said, actually the most telling thing, not necessarily interesting, was that there's this sort of the mathematical understanding that when you push these sort of things to the limit, and they said this at the beginning too, when you're pushing things to the limit of what can be understood together, as opposed to completely unrelated to not completely unrelated, but basically as far apart as can get without being unrelated, then you've got the biggest coefficient, then you've got the biggest creative gap. So what is the limit of the relatedness? See, this is this infinitesimal thing that Fourier transforms, or the Fourier concepts, and then also the gap up here. These are just examples. Where is it? So this is this bit up here. We've got the where was it? Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot to have the video going correctly. But the limit of the what can be related together without just being confused or just not related, then that in some senses you're saying is the existence where while it initially starts with just the artist and their subjective state, the fact that it can be moved out and other people can appreciate it then becomes this entanglement. And whereas one person understands it, the other people have sort of the artist's intention and then their engagement with it and how they understand what the authors are calling entanglement, but in some sense is really the bigger the difference, the bigger the gap between the intention and the receiver's interpretation. And so as long as they can still bridge that gap in understanding, then there's something common between them and the artist, and that is what the foundation of this sort of the foundation of creativity sort of lies in. That we can make the same sort of jump between the artist's intention and the receiver's understanding, and it's not just, well, I don't get it. It's that, oh, I get something, but I don't quite get what. And they used entanglement to show that you can connect very different things in very far away ways, and just like particles can be entangled that are near and far. I mean, the use of science here was sort of, I mean, it's not a deep understanding, a deep engagement with the science. Like, you're not doing any math, like quantum mechanics, but it is using the concepts to try to get an understanding of how we put very disparate things together. And for that matter, in that respect, it's an interesting paper and it's good because this sort of gap. I haven't heard this analysis of Duchamp before, so I think that's a pretty good too. That Duchamp was trying to make this point between jumping the gap between intentions, his intention, and what the viewers were, his audience was receiving, and that was part of the point of his art. And I'm somewhat concerned with that too, because I know what I'm doing here, but I don't understand who the public is and what the public is receiving. So I always like feedback on this project. So this is an interesting way of looking at how we understand what creativity is and art is once it enters the world. Because if this doesn't, I guess, it might matter for the artist when the art's in their own studio, but the art sort of has to be published for this sort of understanding to actually exist. So there is some sort of public sense that goes on with this art. Okay, so that's it for now. I'll be back later tonight, I guess, and if anyone has anything to say now, please let me know, or else I'll sign off. Also, feel free to send me things to read, because this is always need more things to read. Alright, have a good day, stay safe out there, everyone, and be well.